A person who can honestly and without self-deception deal with his feelings has no need to disguise them with the help of ideologies. The basic similarity of the various nationalistic movements flourishing today reveals that their motives have nothing to do with the real interests of the people who are fighting and hating, but instead have very much to do with those people's childhood histories. The mistreatment, humiliation, and exploitation of children is the same worldwide, as is the means of avoiding the memory of it. Individuals who do not want to know their own truth collude in denial with society as a whole, looking for a common enemy on whom to act out their repressed rage. But as the inhabitants of this shrinking planet near the end of the 20th century, the danger inherent in self-deception is growing exponentially, and we can afford it less than ever. Fortunately, at the same time, we now have the tools we need to truly understand ourselves as we were and as we are. Afterword. A book is no substitute for a good therapist, but it can, perhaps, make us aware of our need for therapy by putting us in touch with our suppressed, or possibly even repressed, feelings, and thus triggering a process that may have some very salutary effects indeed. The Drama of Being a Child is a book that appears to have performed this function right from the outset. Since its first publication in 1979, it has gone through a number of new editions and, although much has changed in the world since then, it is still widely read. Despite this gratifying response, I feel the need to review some remarks made in the book in the light of subsequent findings, insights, and second thoughts and bring them into alignment with my latest views on the subject the book deals with. In the course of the 17 years since The Drama of Being a Child first appeared, my attempts to convince the psychoanalytic fraternity of the huge significance of the emotions in the development of the human personality have been increasingly successful. This is partly due to the progress we have made in our knowledge of childhood traumas and the consequences of repressing these traumas. While this progress is to some extent the result of reports on the subject in the media, the main source of it is the ongoing work being done in revealing therapy. Today we also profit from the new perspectives provided by neurobiological research into the human brain. Drawing upon an extensive fund of observations and experiments, Antonio Damasio, the author of the much-read book Descartes' Error, 1994, has established that people who have lost the center of the emotions in the brain as a result of accidents or surgical therapy, removal of brain tumors, etc., are not only incapable of having feelings, but at the same time lose the ability to make decisions and organize their lives. However well the remaining sections of the brain may function, however intact the purely intellectual faculties may prove to be in psychological tests, there remains a substantial impairment of the ability to feel and act. The inescapable conclusion is that for people to be able to organize their lives, they must have access to their emotions. This conclusion appears to me to be of special relevance to our understanding of the consequences of childhood traumas. What happens in neurobiological terms to those children who have not had the opportunity of developing an emotional life of their own, those children whose fate I have described in Drama? Can we say that their problems derive from the fact that they have been unable, or insufficiently able, to develop that section of the brain that enables us to care for ourselves and others? The clinical material and the examples described in Drama seem to confirm such a hypothesis, but a great deal more research needs to be done in order to verify it beyond a doubt. This, in turn, might help us to understand why many abused and neglected children, forced at an early age to deny and repress their true feelings, have such difficulty in protecting and looking after themselves when they reach the adult stage, or why so many of them act in a destructive and irrational manner although they function perfectly normally on the intellectual plane. To act rationally, they would require access to their true feelings, their genuine selves. Unlike those who have suffered irreversible brain damage as a result of accidents or operations, the victims of cruelty and abuse in childhood can in fact develop the ability to feel at a later stage in adulthood. Researchers are amazed at the flexibility of the human brain, its capacity to compensate for loss throughout the lifetime of the body. This explains why, in some cases, a newly acquired ability to feel achieved via therapy has also affected positive changes in the individual's ability to act, making these people a great deal better at looking after themselves and their children. But this is not always the case. There are some people, and this shows the relative nature of these findings, who despite an extended course of emotional therapy, appear doomed to relive their childhood traumas over and over again. To attain anything like a complete understanding of these different reactions, we require a great deal more experience, reflection, and evidence about the problems of repression, denial, and healing than we have at the present time. Will brain research be able to help us in this? Time will tell. One thing we can say is that the latest scientific findings confirm something that many therapists already know from experience. Rational, constructive action depends not only on the intactness of our intellectual faculties, but also on the extent to which we have access to our true emotions. Technology can never replace this function of the brain. It is thus high time for us to engage in the active investigation of our feelings. Until recently, psychology took little or no note of feelings. Emotions were taboo, a source of discomfiture, possibly of apprehension. This has now changed. The emotions have been the subject of a number of psychological studies. We can only hope that, in the future, children will be encouraged at an early age to learn to take their feelings seriously, to understand them and come to terms with them, if not in the home, then perhaps with guidance in school. In my criticism of the one-sided intellectual approach to psychoanalysis, I emphasize the significance of emotional experience in the psychic and spiritual development of the individual. When the book first appeared in the late 70s, little was known in Europe of the new therapeutic methods already being practiced in America. These methods concentrated on working on the feelings of the patient and have long since found their way from the United States to Europe. In the last few years, we have been able to observe a veritable boom in the number of different approaches used. Body therapy, bioenergetics, gestalt, and primal therapy are only a few of the terms indicative of this new departure. In many cases, noticeable successes were achieved merely by enabling patients to experience their own feelings and thus relieving them of the bodily pressures they were previously subject to. In other cases, however, the result was an addictive dependence on feelings of pain. This in its turn reinforced the dependence on the therapist as healer. Such things as the darkened room setting and the intensive phase in primal therapy strongly encourage regression, sometimes to the point of total helplessness on the part of the patient and an attendant uncritical idealization of the therapist. This regression to the status of a small child puts the patient in an extremely vulnerable position where she can easily be taken advantage of by an insensitive therapist. Every therapeutic process, and the confrontation with early traumas in particular, requires a high degree of competence and integrity on the part of the accompanying therapist. A genuine alliance of this nature will enable the client to draw upon the entire range of acquired adult skills, all his gifts and strengths, the full gamut of his own healing potential, and to use all this to engage in the work of actively mourning the losses he has suffered. If the patient is not accompanied in this way, he can be subjected to the extreme forms of manipulation familiar to us, not only from sects, but also from many so-called therapy centers themselves, displaying sectarian structures and proliferating today. Fortunately, there are other positive developments. The fact that the new therapeutic methods are susceptible to misuse does not, of course, mean that they cannot be used with complete honesty, i.e., with caution and a receptive attitude towards critical relativization. Psychoanalytic experience in working with transference and countertransference has also played its part in this endeavor, as today's analysts are much more familiar with these new methods than was formerly the case. Analysts trained in a variety of approaches can perhaps help in curbing an excessive, uncontrolled misuse of the regression method. Already some progress has been made in this direction. It is becoming increasingly apparent that, as far as the perception of childhood reality is concerned, psychoanalysis now eschews the rigidity it displayed earlier and no longer subscribes unconditionally to the Freudian viewpoint. Reluctant as many orthodox analysts are to change their ideas, our knowledge of the impact of childhood traumas on the emotional life of the adult does appear to be gaining ground in the approaches employed by analysts, thus enhancing the quality of their work. It is not possible for me today to recommend one method over another or to assume responsibility for a particular therapist. This responsibility must be left entirely to the reader. In an interview in April 1995, I was asked what I would look out for if I had to go in search of a therapist for myself. My answer was as follows. Unlike small children, an adult has his capacity for reasoned thinking at his disposal and also free access to sources of information. He can make use of all that if he wants to. Once he has decided to avoid a form of therapy that will disempower him from the outset, he stands a good chance of obtaining the necessary information on the personality and the training of the therapist before deciding for or against a regression into childhood. At the first interview, he need have no qualms about inquiring what made the therapist choose his profession, what his background is like, what he did before, etc. Unfortunately, most patients don't ask these questions, although there's nothing to stop them from doing so, and they can do a lot to clarify the situation. They feel that it's not their place to ask and wander into that first interview like little children not wanting to put anyone's back up and thinking themselves lucky not to be sent away again. With this attitude, they are bound to experience the therapist as kindly mother or strong father or priest or God and will do everything they can to bring about a happy ending and will be rewarded with love and affection for doing well. What happens then, I have described in drama. The adult falls back on his old survival strategies, he betrays his true self, throws his intellectual and critical faculties overboard, and trusts and hopes that he will be rewarded for his cooperative and well-adjusted attitude by something like love. I would want to make sure that the person I am dealing with is honest. I can find that out by going in pursuit of the facts and not having any inhibitions about doing so. Many people fear reality and prefer to believe what they want to believe. Some, however, want to know whether they are up against a systematic attempt to pull the wool over their eyes. And it is entirely possible to find that out. There are all kinds of indications. The trouble is that precisely those clients in real need of help will prefer to ignore them. If I had to choose a therapist today, I would first ask, is it someone who will respect my personal autonomy? Is the therapist prepared to give me hard and fast information, addresses of people that he or she has demonstrably provided with lasting help? Is it someone who will answer my questions in a satisfactory and honest manner, someone ready and willing to enter into a fair, transparent working alliance, to listen to criticism, to face up to facts, admit inconsistencies, and not promise the impossible? What else, Besides, the choice of the right therapist is necessary if the healing process is to succeed. A great deal. But what seems to be most important for certain people is access to their emotions. For many people divorced from their feelings since early childhood, therapy can be the place where something of eminent importance happens for the first time. The acquisition of abilities that emotionally over-adjusted children cannot develop in youth. Might it not be that intensive pleasurable feelings can encourage this acquisition process? A penitentiary in Lorton, Virginia, reports that a group of dangerous criminals given small animals to look after in their cells, only 20% relapsed into crime, whereas those not given this kind of emotional schooling displayed a relapse count of 80%. One of the things these statistics tell us is that these people who were earlier separated from their own feelings and, for that reason, ruined their own lives and those of others, were in fact able to develop feelings for other creatures. This experience made it possible for them to stop putting up defenses against their own need for love, to perceive that need, to feel loved by their charges, regain some of their self-respect, develop a keener sense of reality, and, as a result, make more humane decisions. Such findings relativize the assumption, which I myself used to share, that it always takes experience of the pain repressed at an early age for emotional blockages to be resolved. This assumption has not been definitely confirmed by the knowledge we have since acquired. The fact of the matter is that other means of access to the emotions have not been systematically researched to a satisfactory degree. Emotions are innate human capacities for reacting to stimuli from the environment. We react to loss, aggression, and danger with anger, fear, or mourning, to love, affection, tenderness, and stimulation with love and joy. As the story of the American prisoners or the stories of Johanna and Anne in drama illustrate, the so-called positive, caring emotions can also be repressed for survival purposes. If in drama, I tend to use the term feelings, I do so to refer both to the innate, primary emotions, and to bring those acquired in the course of the child's upbringing, shame, guilt, jealousy, envy, etc. Some people have the good fortune to build up a happy relationship and either to heal themselves in that relationship or else to draw upon it for the strength needed to consciously expose themselves to the deprivations of their childhood in a process of active mourning. Others may perhaps not be so fortunate in this respect, but may yet find a source and outlet of pleasurable emotions in creative activity. Self-expression, be it in song, music, writing, painting, or sculpture, is always pleasurable. After reading Damasio's book, I could well imagine that the encounter with repressed traumas is but one of many possibilities for discovering and familiarizing oneself with the intensity of one's own emotional world. The advantage of these other routes to self-discovery is that they can have a constructive, nurturing function that paves the way for the integration of past painful experiences, if this indeed proves necessary. But sometimes those past traumas will fade and lose their importance in a present that offers the individual the possibility of free expression and, above all, the possibility of remaining in close touch with his present feelings and emotions. I spent a long time looking for a total exploration of my childhood history. Now I see that this was hubris. Our brain resembles a computer with countless programs. How can we presume to master them all, to assert that one single therapeutic method can delete all the programs written into our early upbringing? Today this seems to me impossible, even after 100 years of therapy. We can find out, however, which of those programs work for us and which of them against us. A child cannot do this, an adult can at least try. Only when I relinquished the idea of total exploration did I open myself up to other discoveries. Readers' letters show me that other people too make their own discoveries and that I can safely trust their ability to do so. Alice Miller, 1995.